All right, it's time for my March reading wrap up. I finished 6 books in March, which was kind of surprising. I thought March went better than February, but realistically, when I look back at it, I knew I was struggling in March to get things read, especially in the middle of the month. And I did the same thing in February, but I ended up pushing myself to finish 4 books in 4 days at the end of February, which really pushed up my number. So in March, I did not have the luxury to do that. And so I finished 6. Now, technically, with where I want to be with my reading at the end of the year, I am still well ahead of plan. However, coming off the heels of January and February, March was my most disappointing month so far as the number of books read. So starting first with the books that I did not rate, I reread the fairy tale The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. I reread this because after reading Paladin's Grace, T. Kingfisher in February, I decided I wanted to pick up more T. Kingfisher, and I happen to already own The Raven and the Reindeer, and that is based on the fairy tale of the Snow Queen. So I went down and opened up my fairy tale book from when I was a kid, which I still have, and reread The Snow Queen, and I can honestly say I did not remember that fairy tale at all. It was all like brand new. So that was interesting. So I finished that. And then my Audible book for the month was The Widows of Malabar Hill by Sujata Massey. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was too long. And I'm going to go a little bit more in detail in another video. This was a book that I was reading because it was based upon recommendations that I received from somewhere. And so I'm really going to get into the book in that video. But there is a dual timeline, and I don't really know if it worked for me the way that it kept jumping back and forth. I think that we could have, if we needed to know all of that background information, it would have been great to have it chronologically. I don't think it added anything to the story to keep bouncing back and forth. But I don't give books that I listen to a rating because I'm usually driving or doing something else as I'm listening to them, and I feel like I might miss things and nuances, and so they just go into my completed for the month. Now for the other 4 books, I did give ratings to them. My lowest rating was a 3.3, and that was for the book for my Top Shelf Challenge that I finished in March, which was Confessions of an Innocent Man by David R. Dow. And so I'll have a full review of that in my Top Shelf video. Just suffice it to say that this was a debut. David R. Dow is a law professor, and there were quite a few things about it that were very first novelly. So kind of feel like I was being generous with a 3.3, to be brutally honest. Next at 3.5 was Cross My Heart by Megan Collins. This I read for the creepy, it was actually the February read, but we did not have book club until the beginning of March. So I finished it like the day before, and so it fell into my March reads. This is the story of a young woman who has a heart transplant. She is making contact with the husband of her heart donor through the donor agency, so everything is anonymous. However, he gives her enough information about himself that he is an author, that his wife was an educator, that she is able to figure out that he is one of her favorite writers who lives in this town that they live in. Do they live in Seattle, Portland? Somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, from what I remember. And she sort of becomes obsessed because he's one of her favorite writers. He's very attractive. She has his wife's heart. And she starts putting together this little fantasy in her head that maybe they'll end up together. Now, the way that the story is told, we have her perspective and we have emails that the male author is writing to his best friend, explaining that he is in a relationship with a woman by her name who he describes and physically resembles her. But we don't get her perspective on their relationship. We just hear her wanting to have the relationship. And so she quickly becomes an unreliable narrator to us. Now, as she is sharing with her friends the information that she believes she has his wife's heart, her friends start telling her some sketchy things about him, like, maybe he killed his wife. There's a rumor online that he's not such a nice guy and he could have potentially killed her because they were both in the house when she died in this accident. And he said that he didn't hear it happen. He left her lying there until she was dead, basically. So she starts to worry that what if he is a murderer? And she starts to basically investigate him on her own to figure out, is he above board? Is he somebody I should be getting close to? Could he really have killed his wife? There's going to be mayhem. We are wondering if she's doing things. There's a bad breakup in her past before she had the heart transplant that we learn more about. It's messy, and it just felt like, it was just messy drama. I had never read anything by Megan Collins before. It was a decent read, 3.5. It was nothing earth-shattering and mind-blowing, and I did figure out the twist far in advance of it happening. So with that being said, I feel comfortable with my sort of middle-of-the-road rating for it. Next up was One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. I gave this a 3.8. I read The Woman in Cabin 10 a few years ago, basically when it came out, which is more than a few now. And I only gave that a 3.5. So I'm actually rating this higher than The Woman in Cabin 10. This is the story of our protagonist, Lila, and Lila has a boyfriend, Nico. Lila is a postdoc and she's doing research and it's not working out really well. So she knows that basically her study's not going to get funded. She's going to have to go find another study to work on. She needs to be looking for a new job. She and Nico have been together long enough. She's not sure where it's going. They seem to be lagging behind all of their other friends who are getting married and having babies and buying houses, and they don't have any money. Nico is a not very successful actor, and so they don't have any money. Now she's going to be losing her job. They're going to be even further behind. And she's really questioning everything. And at the same time, Nico comes home one day and he's got this great opportunity. His agent has lined up a reality TV show for him called One Perfect Couple. Caveat being that Lila has to go on the show with him. She does not want to do this. She does not want to be in the public eye. She's worried that this will hurt her academic career. And he convinces her by guilting her into it. He's very narcissistic and controlling and all of that. And, you know, you have to do this for me. This is my chance to just catapult my career forward. So the way that the show works, it is continuously described as a cross between Love Island and Survivor. And I've never watched Love Island, have watched Survivor in the past. So you have these couples on this deserted island, and there are challenges, and basically if one of a couple bombs out in the challenge, they leave, and then that leaves their partner on the island free to basically take a partner from someone else. So what Lila is thinking is that she can kind of rig this. She can go on it with Nico to get him on the show, and then she can bomb a challenge and be sent home in the first week or two, and she can go back and start looking for a new job, and he can still be on the show. It'll kickstart his career. Everything's perfect, and they're both happy. Well, of course, that is not going to happen, and Lila is still on the island the first night when a horrible storm strikes the island and strands the contestants there with none of the crew, who have all gone back to this yacht that they've been sailing on for a meeting, and the yacht was offshore and it is no longer there in the storm. And so they are stranded. They do not have any food sources. They don't have any water sources. And the story basically watches as you're in this actual survivor environment with these contestants on the show, and how they interact with each other, and the tribal stuff that always comes in these types of stories, like Lord of the Flies, etc. Now, the marketing for this novel made a direct correlation to Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. So I went into it thinking that one of these people left on the island is a crazed murderer and is picking off contestants one by one. That is not what happens. So if you have not read it, you need to know before you go into it, and you read the blurb and you think, oh, Christie, and then there were none. Okay, I know how that goes. That is not what happens here. I don't even think that this is really a thriller. And during book club, I don't know if I said that. I read this for Make with Books Patreon book club. And during the book club discussion, we all, I think, were consistently agreed that this was not a thriller. It's not a mystery. It's not a thriller. It's a survival story. And it was good writing. Obviously, Ruth Ware is a talented author. It was just a unique take on something being in the thriller category. And I really think it does it a disservice comparing it to And Then There Were None. The final book and the highest rated for the month was A Killing Cold by Kate Alice Marshall, which I gave 4.2 stars. This was the March book for Creepy Book Club, so I bookended my month, my ratings with Creepy Book Club books. And this is a story about Theo, our protagonist, who is in a relatively new relationship with Connor, and he's asked her to marry him. Of course, Connor is incredibly wealthy, and his family owns a mountain lodge where they go for 2 weeks at Christmas time every year. And Christmas is approaching, and so Connor wants to bring Theo, of course, because they've just gotten engaged. Now, we all know that they're not going to want him to marry her she has nothing, she's not of their class. And they're going to try to tell him it's too soon, etc. There is nothing unexpected there. And yes, that does all happen. However, like most thrillers, Theo tells us really, really quickly that she's got a horrible secret from her past, and she's really, really worried that Connor's family is going to find out about it. Now, again, I didn't say this about One Perfect Couple, but this is a trope that I find so frequently in thrillers, which is the surprise factor when something happens to one of the characters, that I feel like if anybody else in the world was in the situation, this thing would not be a surprise. So for example, in One Perfect Couple, you have a bunch of people in their 20s who are all into reality TV and all want to be contestants on it and all very familiar with all of these Love Island and, are avid watchers of it, etc. And when they get to the island and the producer tells them all, give me your phones, they're all shocked that they have to give up their phones. Why would a reality TV show contestant think that they were going to be able to keep a hold of their cell phone? That did not make sense. In A Killing Cold, why would Theo think that Connor's uber wealthy family was not going to do a background investigation of her and find all her deep, dark, dirty little secrets, which were not that deep? They were there for public information. So that's not even the real key piece to the thriller. The family trying to break up Theo and Connor's relationship is not at the heart of the thriller. Everything is with Connor's family, basically. So when they get there, Theo discovers that this amazing, huge lodge, only the grandparents are allowed to sleep inside of the lodge. Everyone else has a designated cabin that they sleep in for the duration of their visit. So she and Connor get a cabin. Connor's sister and her wife and their son have a cabin. Connor's mom and his younger brother have a cabin. And Theo knows that Connor's dad has passed away, but he's never talked about the circumstances of it. And now they've only been together a few months, so they really don't know each other at all. And she finds out when they arrive that Connor's father, Liam, committed suicide, or it's assumed that he committed suicide, and that it was there on the mountain. There is one of these outlying cabins that is no longer used, and Theo assumes that this is the cabin where Connor's father died, and the story is that he fell from the roof of the lodge. But did he fall from the roof of the lodge, or did he fall from the roof of this cabin, or did he jump from the roof of this cabin? So she's curious and nosy, as all good protagonists are. And so one night she can't sleep and she goes out into the snow to have a little midnight walk, and makes her way to this cabin. And when she goes inside, she finds a picture of herself when she was a little girl, and she is holding the hand of a man who, because of his resemblance to Connor, she assumes is Liam. And the thing about Theo is that she was adopted when she was 4 years old. And prior to being adopted, she has no memories. So when she looks at this picture of a very young her, she knows it's her because she's seen family photos and she knows it's her from those photos. However, this obviously predates them, and she must have been here and she must have known Liam, and she just can't remember any of it. So she starts to panic and try to remember what happened. So she begins thinking about the little bits and pieces of memory that she does have, which include a memory of a woman, and she remembers a man, but she considered him a monster. And she's trying to piece together, was Liam the monster? Was the woman her mother, etc.? And none of this is a spoiler. This is all included in the synopsis on the book jacket. And so basically we will follow as she's piecing together her memories, trying to do investigation, trying to figure out what happened to Liam, trying to figure out what happened to this woman who she assumes is her mother, and how did she end up with her adoptive parents, because she was adopted in Oregon, and this is all happening on the East Coast. So how did this four-year-old little girl get from the East Coast to Oregon to be adopted by her adoptive parents? I enjoyed Marshall's writing. I will say that I do think that this is more of a mystery book than a thriller. There are some thrillery elements there at the end as she's figuring everything out, but it really is a whodunit. It really is both a what happened and then whodunit. And so I think you could technically categorize this as a mystery, and using my rules for what makes a mystery, I really do think that this falls more into mystery than thriller. Now, as I'm sitting here thinking about that, I kind of take it back, because no, it truly is a whodunit, I think is at the heart of it. So I do think it's a mystery. And that could be why I rated it, of all the books I read in March, I gave it the highest rating of a 4.2 when everything else was more of a thriller. I did not talk about, when I was talking about Confessions of an Innocent Man, I would say, like One Perfect Couple, Confessions of an Innocent Man is neither a thriller nor a mystery as well. It is called, the synopsis on the cover calls it a thrillingly suspenseful novel. It was not suspenseful at all. Anyway, that was my March. Overall, I think it, except for not being too pleased with only 6 reads, I think that it was successful overall. Nothing was lower than a 3.3, which is an average rating, so that's good. And I do wish I had read more for the month, obviously. So thanks for going through my March with me. Tell your pets I said hi. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.